The text message was sent 1 month before the game. 4 words. Simple, casual, the kind of thing you fire off without thinking. Ed Davis typed to Malik Beasley, "Only way you can beat Vegas is sports betting. Everything else they got the edge." Beasley wrote back, "Well yay my nigga," trying to find like 2K asterisk. And then Davis said the thing that changed everything. He asked Beasley if he had a Snapchat account, the encrypted messaging app with disappearing messages, not a phone call, not a regular text, Snapchat. Because what Davis wanted to say next was not something he was willing to say anywhere that could be saved. "Better to talk on there," Davis wrote. "We can make some good money." That conversation, recovered by federal investigators, is now sitting in a sealed indictment that was unsealed on Monday, June 30th, 2026 by the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. And what it describes is not a gray area. It is not ambiguous. It is not a matter of interpretation. It is a sitting NBA player agreeing to intentionally underperform in professional basketball games so that his associates could place fraudulent bets and collect the winnings. And Malik Beasley is not the first. He is not the second. He is not even the third NBA figure to be charged with this kind of scheme in the last 12 months. He is the fifth. The sixth, actually, when you count the Hall of Famer. This is not a single player making a terrible decision in isolation. This is a network. This is organized. This is something that has been building inside the NBA for years while the league looked the other way and the betting industry quietly paid for the privilege of access, and the federal government has finally decided it has seen enough. Let's start from the beginning. Because to understand how Malik Beasley ended up in a Brooklyn federal court facing decades in potential prison time, you have to understand what was already there before his name ever appeared in an indictment. The story begins on October 23, 2025. A Thursday morning, the Portland Trail Blazers had played the previous night. Their head coach, Chauncey Billups, a basketball Hall of Famer, a 2004 NBA champion, a 5-time All-Star, and one of the most respected figures in the sport, had coached that game. He went home, and at some point early the following morning, federal agents came to his door. They arrested him in Portland, Oregon. Across the country, in Orlando, Florida, where the Miami Heat had played the previous evening, agents found Terry Rozier in a hotel room. They arrested him there. And in a separate location, former NBA player and coach Damon Jones was also taken into custody. At a press conference in New York that day, U.S. Attorney Joseph Nosella Jr. stood before cameras flanked by FBI Director Kash Patel and laid out what the federal government had been building in secret for more than 2 years. 2 separate indictments, 34 defendants, 11 states, tens of millions of dollars, and at the center of it, connected to NBA players and coaches and their associates, the Bonanno family, the Genovese family, the Gambino family, the Luchas family, the 4 most notorious mafia crime families in New York, in the NBA, in professional basketball games that millions of people watched and billions of dollars were legally wagered on. Let's break down exactly what was alleged, because these 2 cases are separate but related, and understanding both is essential to understanding why Malik Beasley's indictment a year later is not a surprise to anyone who has been paying attention. The first case, which prosecutors named Operation Nothing But Bet, involved a straightforward insider betting scheme. Players and their associates were sharing non-public information about injuries, about lineup decisions, about game preparation, information that outsiders had no access to, and feeding it to a network of gamblers who used it to place bets before the UPRE market could adjust. It is the sports equivalent of insider trading on Wall Street, the same crime, the same corruption, just wearing a jersey instead of a suit. The centerpiece of this scheme was Terry Rozier. According to the indictment, Rozier tipped his associates to his availability for specific games across a 2-year period stretching from December 2022 to March 2024. 7 specific games under scrutiny. In the most damaging example, a Charlotte Hornets game against the New Orleans Pelicans in March 2023, Rozier allegedly shared inside information that he would leave the game early due to injury. His associates took that information and placed over $200,000 in wagers on the under. Rozier exited after just 9 minutes with a reported foot injury. The bets paid out, tens of thousands of dollars in profit, generated in 9 minutes, on a game that had already been decided before the opening tip. Rozier had been investigated by the NBA the previous year. The league met with him multiple times, reviewed the available evidence, and cleared him. Not found in violation of NBA rules, the league said in January 2025. 8 months later, the FBI had him in handcuffs in an Orlando hotel. The second case was something different entirely. Something that, when the details became public, sounded less like a sports scandal and more like a screenplay that had been rejected for being too implausible. Chauncey Billups was a face card. That is the term prosecutors used. A face card. A high-profile celebrity lured to underground poker games. In Manhattan, in Las Vegas, in Miami, in the Hamptons. Not to gamble legitimately, but to serve as bait. His presence, his fame, his Hall of Fame status attracted what prosecutors called the fish. High net worth individuals who would pay to sit at a table with an NBA legend and play cards. What they did not know was that the game was rigged before they sat down. The cheating technology described in Midas. The indictment reads like something out of a spy thriller. Poker chip tray analyzers. Rigged shuffling machines that could transmit card information to an off-site operator. Special contact lenses and eyeglasses that could read pre-marked cards without detection. An X-ray table that could see cards face down. The people running these games were not amateurs. They were professionals who had been running this operation for years, and they had recruited a basketball Hall of Famer to stand at the front door and smile while victims walked in. One game in Las Vegas in April 2019 produced $50,000 in winnings from victims. Another in Manhattan in the summer of 2023 produced approximately $1.8 million in a single night. Victims lost at least $7 million total across the scheme, and prosecutors alleged that Billups was at the table, playing on the cheating team. While the fish lost fortunes, they did not know they had already lost before they sat down. Billups would liar said publicly that anyone who knows Chauncey Billups knows he is a man of integrity, and that men of integrity do not cheat and defraud others. The defense argued that to believe the charges, you would have to believe that Billups was willing to risk his Hall of Fame legacy, his reputation, and his freedom. But the text messages were already in the indictment, and one of them captured, almost perfectly, the casual attitude with which this entire criminal network operated. An alleged orchestrator of the poker scheme texted about Billups during a game in 2019 after a co-conspirator said the victim appeared infatuated with Billups' presence. The text read, "That one guy on the end acted like he wanted Chauncey to have his money. He was starstruck. While losing money, he could not get back to a rigged table." Both Billups and Rozier pleaded not guilty. Damon Jones, facing charges in both cases, pleaded guilty. The investigation was described by prosecutors as one of the most brazen sports corruption schemes since online sports betting became widely legalized in the United States. And then it kept going. Because Billups and Rozier and Jones were not the end. They were the beginning of a thread that the federal government kept pulling. In May 2026, the Justice Department filed a superseding indictment that escalated the charges against Terry Rozier. The new filing accused him of accepting a $100,000 bribe to alter his performance in a specific game, not just sharing information, taking money to intentionally underperform. Wire fraud conspiracy, bribery in sporting contests. The charges compounded, the legal exposure grew. And then, on June 24, 2026, a sealed indictment was signed in Brooklyn. On June 30th, it was unsealed. Malik Beasley, Ed Davis, 4 co-conspirators including Davis's former agent Paolo Zamorano, a gambler named Robert Gorodetsky, and 2 others. 6 defendants. Federal charges including conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bribery in sporting contests, honest services wire fraud conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Charges that collectively threaten prison sentences measured in decades. Now let's talk about Malik Beasley, because understanding who he is and how he got here is essential to understanding why this case is simultaneously shocking and completely predictable. Beasley is 29 years old. He spent 9 years in the NBA, drafted by the Denver Nuggets in 2016. He played for Minnesota, Boston, Utah, Milwaukee, and Detroit. He was a legitimate NBA player, a rotation guard with a real three-point shot. According to Spotrac, he earned approximately $60 million in NBA salary across his career. $60 million. And yet, according to the federal indictment, by 2024 he had accumulated multi-million-dollar gambling losses. Not a few bad nights at the casino. Not a run of bad luck at a poker table. Multi-million-dollar losses. The man who earned $60 million playing basketball had gambled away enough of it that he was willing to compromise the sport itself to try to get it back. The indictment describes the bribe in detail that is almost painful to read. Beasley was not being handed envelopes of cash. He was not receiving wire transfers to offshore accounts. His bribe was simpler and more humiliating than that. Ed Davis, his former Minnesota Timberwolves teammate, was acting as his bookie. Beasley owed Davis money from gambling debts. And the deal that was allegedly struck was this. Beasley would intentionally manipulate his statistics in specific games. Davis and his co-conspirators would place bets based on that insider knowledge. And when the bets paid out, a portion of the winnings would be used to reduce or eliminate Beasley's debt. He was not being paid to throw games. He was being paid in the cancellation of money he already owed. Think about what that means. A man who earned $60 million was so deep in gambling debt that he agreed to betray the integrity of the sport that made him wealthy, not for new money, but to escape the hole he had already dug. The games in question were during Beasley's time with the Milwaukee Bucks in the 2023-24 season. The indictment specifically identifies at least 4 games in which he allegedly manipulated his performance. And the evidence prosecutors have assembled is not circumstantial. It is text messages. It is documented statistical patterns. It is a surveillance of behavior that the federal government spent 2 years building into something they were confident enough to bring before a grand jury. The most detailed example involves the Bucks versus Cleveland Cavaliers game on January 26, 2024. The text exchange on Snapchat the month before. The communication in the days leading up to the game about which statistical categories Beasley would underperform in. The specific pledge to Davis that he would underperform on rebounding. Davis sharing that information with co-conspirators. Those co-conspirators placing tens of thousands of dollars in bets. And during the game, Beasley collecting 3 rebounds, below the betting line, the bets collecting. But the most extraordinary detail is from a different game. The Bucks versus the Los Angeles Clippers on March 10, 2024. The Bucks were leading by 7 points, with 1 second remaining. A Clippers shot had no bearing on the outcome whatsoever. The game was over, and yet, Beasley contested the attempt, and then, with the buzzer sounding, sprinted past 4 players to secure the rebound as time expired. Why would a player sprint to grab a meaningless rebound at the buzzer of a game his team had already won? Because the rebound line was 3.5, and he needed 4 to cover the bet. He finished the game with exactly 4 rebounds. The bet paid out, and nobody in the building, not the fans, not the coaches, not his teammates, not his opponents, had any idea what they had just watched. That is what makes this case so uniquely disturbing. With point shaving, at least the outcome of a game can be altered. People lose or win based on a final score that has been manipulated. The damage is visible. You can look at a scoreboard and see that something went wrong. With prop bet manipulation, the game result is irrelevant. The final score is real. The win or loss is genuine. Everything that matters to the coaches and the teams and the fans and the standings is completely unaffected. What has been corrupted is invisible, a player's individual statistical line, manipulated in ways that produce fraudulent outcomes for bettors, while everyone watching just sees a professional basketball game. It is the perfect crime, almost impossible to detect, and the sports betting industry, which has spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying for legalization, partnering with every major professional league, and placing its branding inside arenas and on broadcasts, created the exact conditions that made it possible. Because here is the thing that nobody in the sports betting ecosystem wants to say out loud. The explosion of player prop bets is what made this scheme viable. Before widespread sports betting legalization, before the 2018 Supreme Court decision that opened the floodgates, wagering on whether a specific player would collect more or fewer than 3.5 rebounds in a Tuesday night regular season game was not a commercially significant product. It existed in limited form. It was not the kind of mass-market betting instrument that billions of dollars flow through. Then legalization happened. Then the apps came. Then the leagues took the money and put the sportsbooks' logos on the jerseys and the courts and the broadcast graphics. Then prop bets became one of the most popular wagering products in the country because they allow casual fans to have a personal financial stake in every individual moment of every individual player's performance across every game of an 82-game season. And then the players noticed. The players, their agents, their associates, their bookies, their gambling networks, people inside the machine, with access to information the public never sees, noticed that a system had been constructed around their bodies and their statistics, and that the people who understood those statistics best were on the inside. The NBA embraced legal sports betting with open arms. Commissioner Adam Silver appeared on the Pat McAfee show just before the Billups and Rozier arrests and called for additional regulations around sports betting as a means of reducing potential game-fixing risks. He acknowledged that the league was not equipped to investigate these cases the way the federal government is, that the NBA lacks subpoena power, that unlike the DOJ, the league cannot threaten a player with contempt charges for refusing to provide evidence. And then, days later, his Mayhound players and coaches were arrested. The indictment in the Beasley case notes something that the NBA has been quietly aware of for months. The agency of Davis's former agent Paolo Zamorano, a currently licensed NBA player agent, named as a co-conspirator and charged alongside the others, is part of what makes this case sprawl beyond just 2 former players with gambling problems. A licensed active NBA player agent, someone with professional access to players, to teams, to the internal information infrastructure of the league itself. Someone who represents clients currently under contract with NBA franchises. That person is now a federal defendant in a sports gambling conspiracy case. The wagers described in the Beasley indictment total more than $75,000, with net winnings of at least $121,000 from the scheme. By the scale of federal financial crime prosecutions, those numbers are modest. But the principle they represent is not modest at all, because every dollar wagered on a Malik Beasley prop bet during those games was placed by someone who believed they were betting on a fair competition. Someone who trusted that the professional athlete whose performance they were wagering on was trying his best. He was not trying his best. He was trying to get exactly 4 rebounds, and they had no idea. 4 of the 6 defendants were arrested on Monday morning. Beasley himself was not in custody as of Monday. His attorney, Steve Haney, confirmed that Beasley would surrender voluntarily by Wednesday. Haney released a statement saying his client maintains his presumption of innocence throughout this 2-year investigation, and that the legal team would mount a vigorous defense. The NBA issued a statement saying it is reviewing the federal indictment and that preserving the integrity of the game is its highest priority. The league said it is cooperating with appropriate authorities. The statement was a keija, word-for-word echo of every statement the NBA has issued over the past 12 months, as its players and coaches have been arrested, indicted, and charged one by one. And the basketball world has to now sit with a question that gets harder to ignore with every new indictment. How many more? Because Malik Beasley, as of this moment, is the 5th or 6th current or former NBA figure to be named in federal gambling indictments across 2 years. And each case has been bigger than the one before it. Each indictment has named more defendants, described more games, detailed more sophisticated methods. The investigation that began with unusual betting activity, flagged by sportsbooks in March 2023, has now produced a sweeping federal prosecution that has touched a Hall of Fame coach, an active player, and now a veteran guard with a decade of NBA service. And prosecutors have been explicit. There will be more. The case is ongoing. The investigation is ongoing. The threads that were pulled when the first indictments were filed in October 2025 have led to a network that extends beyond the names already charged. There is a video circulating online right now. A fan compiled footage from the specific games cited in the Beasley indictment and went back through the film with the benefit of knowing what he was looking for. And what the footage shows, Beasley making inexplicable decisions in moments where the game context made those decisions completely unnecessary, is difficult to watch once you know what you are seeing. That is the real damage of what Malik Beasley allegedly did. Not the $121,000 in fraudulent winnings. Not the bets totaling $75,000. The real damage is that every person who watched those games, every person who cheered or groaned at moments that were allegedly predetermined before the opening tip, was being deceived. Every moment of professional sport carries with it an implicit promise. The players on that floor are competing. They are trying. Whatever you believe about the outcome, the effort is genuine, the competition is real. When that promise is broken, when a player steps onto a court and has already decided what his rebounding total is going to be, something fundamental to the entire enterprise is destroyed. The NBA has now had 6 people charged with destroying that promise. Joseph Nocella Jr., the U.S. attorney who has become the most prominent voice in this prosecution, said in his statement announcing the Beasley indictment that the defendants turned professional basketball into a criminal betting operation. That bribery and insider betting schemes like this one erode the integrity of American sports and victimize the sports-watching public. Victimize the sports-watching public. Not just sports books, not just other bettors, the public, the people who watch games because they believe in them, because they believe the competition is real and the pupsand effort is genuine, and the result, whatever it is, reflects what actually happened between 2 teams who were trying to win. Malik Beasley will surrender to federal authorities in Brooklyn. He will be arraigned. His attorneys will file motions. The case will proceed through the federal system. He faces charges that carry potential sentences measured in decades. And somewhere in an NBA arena next season, players will take the floor, knowing that 2 years of federal investigations have proven that the betting system wrapped around their sport has been used to corrupt the games themselves. The question the NBA has to answer, and has so far failed to answer, is not whether this happened. The indictments are clear. The text messages are in the record. The statistics are documented. The question is how deep it goes, and whether the league that took the betting industry's money and put its logos on the jerseys is ready to honestly reckon with what it helped create. The federal government is still pulling the thread, and it has not told us yet where the thread ends.